probably the first thing I should say is, this is nearly my 20-year anniversary of working on and building out what began as incident management and incident command practices, and turned into what we now call DevOps and a whole bunch of other journeys along the way. And since I started that journey in 2001, very little has changed of what we all know we have to do, but a lot has changed about what is accepted and easy to get done. So Kolton, when I started at Amazon, one of the secrets of my career success was I was planning on leaving tech entirely. And so I joined Amazon with a plan of getting hired by the Seattle Fire Department and switching out of tech entirely and becoming a Seattle firefighter full-time, process that takes between 1 and 5 years. And so when I joined, it was during a period of incredible upheaval, a reliability posture and stance that was very different than Amazon has evolved to since. And I was very proud to be a contributor to changing that. But I personally caused at least one global outage that lasted over 40 minutes in my first week on the job there. And so I want to kind of set that stage as we look at what's been happening and sort of where things go. Is the world that we lived in then was one in which all the things that we have now learned and sort of adopted as best practices over the last 10 or 12 years really were both novel and frankly, it's hard for people to imagine. Kolton, when we met the first time, which I think was at Velocity in 2012, the first question you asked me was, how did you get away with this? How are you able to start this program and do destructive testing and everything else? And I laughed because I actually had forgotten that, when I was running those early versions of that program, we were really pushing to maintain, at least a 9 of availability, right? And it was a very different time back then. And what matters is that the journey that I went on, and we'll talk about that and how it applies to everyone else. But the journey that I went on really was what we kind of think of as convergent evolution. Every large successful organization, from Amazon to Google and all the other companies that were sort of figuring this stuff out, had to go through the same pain and learning process. And whether it was what I did and sort of the approach that I took, or what John Allspaw was doing at Flickr, or what Google was doing, we were all evolving out of a survival imperative into this better way of thinking about and managing change and risk and risk taking. And so I want to kind of set that stage that one, what I started and what has been so exciting to see explode into an entire industry with practices, et cetera, is rooted in a time where we were all figuring this out really for the first time in our industry. And I was just incredibly fortunate to actually be a firefighter and have, wanting to connect my day job with the job I was actually trying to get in the future, and realized, there is so much that I now know and can apply into that environment about how to operate, how to work under pressure, how to deal with emergencies and events, and think about building a safety culture and a program that I was able to draw and build on, as opposed to a lot of other people that had to discover that from first principles. So anyway, I just wanted to provide that framing, and I have my fire helmets behind me. I have my fire here. So I thought I'd just kind of kick it off that way.
That's excellent. Yeah, that need, when you're operating these complex distributed systems, there is a forced evolution of finding what is effective, efficient, and allows you to get your job done, and the system that came up. And to me, I'm very grateful to you for having paved the way, because it was still rough and very early when I took it over. And I can't imagine what it was like, in those very early days. So maybe a fun one to start with. You have the coolest title anyone could have. Maybe tell us a little bit about how you got that title and a little bit about that.
Sure. So my title at Amazon when I started all this was Master of Disaster. And the truth of how I got that, and this is important for everyone that is listening, is, you want to be memorable and you want to give yourself some permission in order to get stuff done. And naming things is interesting and easy. So I typed that into my, business card generator template on my first day at Amazon. And Larry Hughes, who was one of my mentors and the hiring manager that hired me at Amazon, said, okay. And suddenly it became, really, really important. Going all the way back, I joined to work on reliability systems and disaster recovery for Amazon right before September 11th. And right after September 11th, it suddenly, all the tech companies and, Amazon certainly began thinking about and taking what, critical infrastructure and sort of black swan events and, unlikely, unthinkable events were like. And that it really gave me a lot of leeway and permission to, to assert myself. And then, having the credential and my fire service and incident management background certainly helped as well. But yeah, so I took that title and ran with it. I think when I left Amazon, I was a technical program manager, and then beneath that, a master of disaster. But it is a brand that has carried me and my work through the years. I'm proud now that mostly people think of me as being the founder of Chef. Or the person that got more of DevOps going. That I don't hear master of disaster all that often anymore. But that said, it's it worked well, and I encourage anybody that is working in our reliability industry to feel free to follow Larry's permissive advice and take that moniker on if you're working on incident management or reliability or helping people think about and deal with the types of both normal accidents and exceptional moments that allow you to take command in those environments. Yeah.
So it was, in a way, the story you told me again at that velocity it was more than a title. It came with it some authority and some responsibility, and really laid the foundation for how the call leader role operated at Amazon. Tell us a little bit about that?
So. One of the things that every one of us that is interested in reliability and and operations as a discipline has to go through is you realize that there's fundamentally two types of people in the world. There are people that when there is an incident, a danger, an emergency, they feel moved and capable of moving forward, and those that either freeze or go away. I am definitely in the move forward category. I have thousands of hours of training and other stuff on my, fire and emergency side. But what I realized was at Amazon, and, we've all seen various versions of this and now created a whole industry around it, that what we needed to do was build a comfort and a practice and facility with dealing with complex, large-scale incident management. On my very first day of Fire Academy, my fire chief, Mike Birch, said, and wrote on the board and said, "You don't choose the moment chooses you. You only get to choose how prepared you are when it does." And I think probably of anything that I have ever learned and internalized, that was the moment when my life changed and I suddenly became a different person to both myself and the way in which I carried myself in the world. Everyone that's attending today and seeing this, you're one of those people that cares enough about the systems that we build and the infrastructure that we depend on, that you are one of those people that wants to do things and help. You're action oriented. You are trying to improve stuff. And eliminate, the best day is when you don't have to do anything. So when I started what was called the Call Leader program at Amazon, I put everyone through a modified version of the incident management training program that I have. I'm in the ICS system, which incidentally the BlackRock partners, who were some of my original trainers, also firefighters, very senior firefighters. They have an incident management book that basically did this exact thing, but just changed the word command to manager, and that made it really palatable for sort of the environment within Amazon. But most importantly, I distributed authority for people to take charge in these complex situations. The most important incident command rule is that if no one is in charge, you are in charge. And it doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter how experienced you are. And then I began giving people little badges and other things, like little call leader badges that had, render all lawful aid requested by this person, and got in our phone tool and other things, special status conferred. Not that it actually changed what we were already doing, but it made people feel comfortable and ready to take charge and lead these incidents so that they would be better resolved, and that people were more comfortable taking action. So that's probably kind of the first thing, which is for a lot of what we're doing, in the traditional physical world, disaster and emergency management profession, I'm like really low on the totem pole. I can lead a task force. I have led task forces. In the technology world, I'm pretty high, right? And so the interesting thing is that the level of training and authority that any one of you have in an emergency, an event, in a situation, really basically rises to your competence and your ability to just get things done. And I found that giving people little tiny tokens of status really, really helps. Not because it changed anything, but because you could just show up and say, "Yeah, I'm in charge." And unless somebody else says they're in charge, which is a great day, right? Great, not my problem. I'm going to go somewhere else. Then it makes everything a lot easier, and it allows people who would otherwise be frozen or move away to engage safely and trust you. And hopefully you're a person that people should trust, which if you're here, you probably are.
Yeah, that's great. Emily spoke a little bit about distributing that authority, and as an appropriate way, that authority and autonomy in a distributed system.
Yep.
I'll tell you, those tokens of status mattered because I was still young in my career when I was a call leader, and it was a bit intimidating to tell a VP at Amazon or a senior manager, director, to mute their phone because we could hear them typing, or you need to just wait a few minutes while we figure this out. But it's what needed to happen to resolve that incident at the time. It's funny, we talked a bit about culture when you and I were chatting last week, and I learned something that I hadn't heard before. Apparently, some folks wanted to get you fired for what you were doing, and I think again, folks that are out there trailblazing and doing things that are pushing the envelope probably have felt similar to you. So I wonder if you could tell us a bit about that.
Well, I'm a person that reacts, I engage when challenged. Let's just say that. And
toward the fire.
I think the biggest thing is, and I distributed the pagers. I put every developer on call. And like there was a day when it was just our 14-person operations group, a traditional, the systems and network operations team. And to all those that were part of that, I treasure that time, and we did some really hard things. I got 167 pages in a single day, in a single 24-hour on-call, that kind of thing. But yeah, it was, so the most controversial thing we did was say, in order to give you the type of autonomy that we need to make it so that every team can deploy, right? This is a problem we all go through. We go through you start off, you're building something small, and then there's a small group of blessed people that are allowed to deploy new software. Well, when you're running a very complicated distributed system, you've got to be able to just get that authority and responsibility distributed out. And so we adapted the PagerDuty tool, which, by the way, Alex of PagerDuty definitely took inspiration from that early work, and the team that built those internal tools at Amazon. And but yeah, so then there came a day where somebody had to be the one that said, yeah, we're going to put all the developers on call, and that was not popular. Nor was it then popular when I started running game day events that would literally wake up every one of those teams with a destructive real-time test, a practice in and of itself that was extremely unpopular, and I would have to deal with VPs and others who were really angry that I was wasting time and working on something other than, shipping software. And it's like, well, this is how we're going to get to this reliable state. So one of the things that I learned in this process is really, everything we do is first and foremost about people and culture. I was able to prove this out by when the BlackRock partners started consulting to technology companies. These are firefighters. And they started doing tech consulting to very large companies, teaching them how to do tier 1 incident management and following those practices. And they were like, this isn't going to work. And then suddenly they found that they're like, oh, this is no different than any other large complex incident, other than these. They use the term knuckleheads. Don't seem to understand how incident command works, and so we got to teach them more about that. So what I found in my own journey is, I was willing to be unpopular in part because, again, I was holding my ticket to join Seattle Fire eventually. And so okay, well, if I get fired, it just, means I'll have to go drive, an ambulance or something for a little bit, but it's going to be fine. Amazon's stock price was like $7 when I joined. Again, it's just a different time. It's a startup at that point, as opposed to the thing that we now see and is incredible now, right? But the other part of that was really having learned how to work with really great executive sponsors. So I was fortunate enough to work very closely with Werner, who's the CTO, Werner Vogels, who, once he understood what we were trying to do, really embraced it and saw it as a force to, push out and make a lot of change. And so, I think all of us that go through this kind of maturity in an organization. So either you're working for a startup or a small team or something else, and you basically have visions of how it's supposed to work, and and a roadmap to get there, and it's just you and friends, and then things start to get bigger and faster. Or you're joining a large organization, sometimes large organizations that are in pain and not really understanding how to get themselves out of that pain. Regardless, there's always going to be resistors. And so what I've learned over the years is when you're making these things, in the fire service, we learned a couple of things. One, there is no change to safety code, right? We didn't get sprinklers because a bunch of building developers decided sprinklers are great. What we want to do is spend a whole lot more money on installing piping and mandatory testing and everything else. We didn't get those because people thought it was a good idea. We unfortunately got it because there was a great loss of life. There were and one of the hardest parts about working on building resilient systems, which is a combination of people who understand both the operational and infrastructure elements, and then build the preventative and safety systems that basically get baked into society over time, our culture, that culture, et cetera. But you don't get to make big changes unless people have a shock event that allows them to take it seriously, and people become complacent over time. So one of the most important parts of my work over the now 20 years has been working on both teaching people how to think about and move and act better in times of crisis, but also a critical element is capturing that in the after action process or the post-mortem process, and being able to say, this is what we learned, and you get a currency, a social currency and permission to be able to make those big changes. One of the parts for me that was what guided my career arc was the realization that, yes, you work for an e-commerce site or, some other piece, but, if things aren't working for long enough, like a lot of people end up, needing to go home for the day. Right. And one of the things that was really foundational to me was the realization that, yes, we were, if we had an outage, that would be bad for the top end of the business. But, eventually the people who are working in fulfillment centers would run out of work, and that's a bad day for them. And so I was able to kind of capture that and think about that. And if you think about what almost all of us do, very little of the internet world, the connected world, is frivolous at this point. Certainly in the last year. At the beginning, incidentally, of COVID, I printed out my FEMA certification and pandemic response, and I'm like, it's going to be okay. We've trained for this. There's a team in place. This is like, I know that I'm going to go quickly recertify as an EMT so I can be out in the field working on vaccine. Just like, I had this whole thing, and we had become complacent, and many mistakes were made, and we lost this critical response capability that people like me had signed up for and thought, still exists, right? People become complacent over time without sort of exposure and understanding to these risks. And so what you need to do is, when you have social permission, because an event has occurred or some other thing, you need to exploit that event in order to raise up a culture of safety, raise up people's awareness. You create a budget for cultural change. The other part of that that is so important is recognizing that the work that we do matters. It is literally what runs society. Is the services that we now run are all essential infrastructure, with some very occasional frivolous exceptions. But like the things that we build and run are important, not just for our own jobs and what we're trying to do, but all the people that depend on the fabric that we as critical infrastructure providers provide. And so I've found that, one, you really want to capture those moments where there's an incident, an outage, a near miss, something else, and use that as currency to make big changes. And then reinforce that by drawing people to the mission and saying, we can't have another outage this year because these are all the people that depend on us. So every organization goes through this. None of this is new at this point. It wasn't new when I started it, 20 years ago, and was adapting from the fire service. The fire service had figured it out 30 years prior, and it was like all settled at that point. Like, this is how we do it. And so, so one thing I just want to say to people is, it is okay that you're not perfect. It is okay that not everyone will listen to you yet. What you need to do is build up from a place of trust and safety, build these champions, help people be part of the movement that you're trying to drive. And then it's pretty awesome that the tooling has evolved so much that we're having fights about what the best observability tool is. That's pretty cool, right? And so that's a new world that I am excited to live in.
Wow, there's so much wisdom in what you just said there. I mean,
pain is what it comes from. Pain.
The pain. Well, look, pain is a teacher. Pain is an instructor. And going through outages and being woken up at 1 a.m. and being call leader on the side of the freeway next to my motorcycle in the rain in Seattle is what built into me a big aversion for outages. And really, how do I get in front of that? How do I prevent that? And that preparation, you talked about it, and I think it's important to double down on. There's a reason we all go through fire drills. There's a reason we all go through these safety things, so that in the heat of the moment, we react calmly and safely, and we don't make it worse. And that's one place I feel like, as an industry, we're great at DevOps. We're talking about continuous deployment. We're doing all these things. And whenever I ask what your on-call training look like, the answer is lights out, blank stares, just like, oh, is that something we got to do? And what happens is, the way most of us get trained, here's your pager. Good luck. Figure it out. Yeah. You're smart.
I mean, the good news is we're not actually still distributing pagers, but yes, yeah.
I still have mine. I still have my Amazon pager.
Yeah, you held on. Yeah, that's good. Man, I should have kept one. The training is essential, but and in part it is because you do want to build that comfort. Indecision is the worst thing that happens in incidents of any kind, and just getting people used to what Ron Vidal and Rob Schnepp at BlackRock Partners call peacetime and wartime operations, where peacetime everything's normal, and wartime, like, things are broken, and if we don't fix them, really bad things will happen. Whatever your version of that is, having some comfort with that, which is what we started with the game day program. It was both tech helping people gain confidence with situations under stress, as well as familiarity with the tools and processes and other things. As a person, even as me in my own company, we've done some on-call training, and then you always learn, a little bit on the job as well. I mean, the reason to get I had to do a 1.5-year internship with the Palo Alto Fire Department to get my Firefighter 1 certificate is, there's whatever 2,100 hours of exposure that you have to get to the job before you understand what the job really is. Yeah. But absolutely, training is an opportunity to at the very least exercise your system, so you're not letting those people down.
Yeah, that opportunity to see it, to participate in it. When I joined Amazon, I read every postmortem, every outage we had. I listened to every call, and that was not quite enough to prepare me for when it was my turn to be in the hot seat. It made it easier.
It did. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate you.
Oh man, can I have another minute or two to talk about the future? I have notes and what I wanted to say. Is it going to blow up?
Final thoughts. Tell us about the future.
Here's my final thoughts. What we're doing right now, what everyone here is doing, we have figured out how to do on-call. We've figured out alerting. We've figured out there are many different ways of doing it. We're starting to move up the stack into observability. What the change that I am hoping to see happen in the next couple of years is, as I said, about kind of the safety standards and systems. For me, the dream over the years has been, first we do CI and CD. And then we start integrating into our testing and release management process the type of sort of reliability, failure, complex modeling, fuzzing into that tool chain, whatever that tool chain is, so that a lot of the kind of broken stuff that we could have caught earlier and that experience is baked in both at a cultural level, but also at a technical level. And I think that is where we're starting to converge, right? It is obvious when I say it that that's what we're going to need to do. And so what I am hoping we will start to see as we master the observability space and all the different approaches to it and all the defaults, really will be that next evolution of safety standards, where we're able to say, just like when you walk hopefully soon into an office building and there's sprinklers and panic door hardware and stairwells and all kinds of other engineered safety systems that are built on a common core set of standards, what we're going to see is the same type of failure testing, capacity testing, easy break fix management and complex system testing that is integrated at the core of the software development process. I know that this is what you're working on. I know that there are others that are working on this. I don't actually believe that there's going to be any one perfect solution, but we have made so much progress on alerting, on monitoring, on observability, on instrumentation. That is obviously the next step in the maturity chain, and I am excited to see what everyone does. That's my note.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Well, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much for your time, Jesse. Hope to have you back sometime in the future, and enjoy the rest of your day. The one bit of wisdom I want everyone to take away is never let a good disaster go to waste. Use it to enact change.
Learn $1 worth of lesson for every $1 you spend in failure.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Thank you.